Yes, yes, my camera's making funny faces at me. Um, Welcome back to Hot Cakes and Hot Reads for December 6th. I am Adam Gilbert Cole. I am the Adult Services Librarian at William Jeanes Memorial Library. You are here on our Facebook page watching this event today. So today we're going to make some pancakes and talk about some books. Hot Cakes and Hot Reads is the brainchild of William Jeanes Library patron John Lewis. Thank you, John! As always. Library news first. So the big news for the library is that starting this past week, we are back to curbside-only service at William Jeanes Memorial Library, which means that the building itself is closed to the public. We are still happy to get books and other materials in your hands through our curbside delivery. So if you have questions about it, go to jeaneslibrary.org. There's all kinds of information on our front page, and we can answer any questions either here on the Facebook page, or you can give us a call, 610-828-0441. You can email us at jeansinfo@mclink.org, or you can email me directly, acole, A-C-O-L-E, @mclink, M-C-L-I-N-C.org. So that's the big news for this week. We are just trying to make sure that everyone, including our staff, is acting safely and in the community's best interests right now. So, like I said, for more information, check our Facebook page. All right, so today we're going to talk about good books, and I'm going to make some good pancakes. I hope they're good. Cross your fingers. Again, we are experimenting today. The books that I'm going to talk about, I think all of the books, except for the ones in the lightning round that I'm talking about, are only available in our library catalog in hard copy. You can go to jeaneslibrary.org and click on the search button in the top right corner of the screen and search our catalog for the titles. We also do have books that are available downloadable to your devices through the Libby app, so either your smartphone or your tablets. Again, more questions about that, email me or check our website. Today, we are making Greek pancakes. They are tiganites, and they are made with yeasted batters. So I actually have a batch mixed up already. I'm gonna make a second batch just so you see the process, but because it has to sit for an hour and do a little bit of rising and bubbling with the yeast, I had to mix a batch beforehand. So I think this is the first time I've done that for this program, where I had to do the preparation. I feel a little like a Food Network chef all of a sudden or something. Anyway, so some Greek folks believe that these are the oldest known pancakes. I have not done any kind of research about this, and so I can't say with any authority, but the recipe for these is a pretty old one. Alright, so I've got flour, and I'm going to be scooping that out as we look because I have to sift it with my sifter, which I will be happy to play with later. First, though, we are going to activate our yeast. So I've got half a cup of warm water, into which I am going to spoon a tablespoon of dry active yeast. So in this case, it's not instant yeast that you would get in a packet, because you don't want it to be instant. You want it to work with the moisture here, because the moisture is part of the recipe. And then sugar is right here. Half a teaspoon of sugar. I'm using my quarter teaspoon measure because I couldn't find my half teaspoon measure this morning. And that goes in, and that goes in, and I'm going to whisk it up a little bit here. And what's going to happen is we're going to let this sit for the next 5 minutes to make sure that my yeast is good. I hope it's good because I already made a batch. We'll see. But what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes is this guy is going to start bubbling, which will tell us that the yeast is happy, because the yeast is going to start eating that sugar that we just put in there and making little bubbles. Okay, so that's step one, everybody. While I am sifting my flour here, which I'm going to measure first, we start with 3¼ cups of all-purpose flour. The recipe says somewhere between 3/4 and 3½ cups of all-purpose flour because we'll see what the consistency of the batter looks like after I do the blending later. And my sifter's not huge, so I actually have to do the sifting in 2 batches. So 1½ cups here, and sift. And while I'm doing the sifting, we'll talk about our first book, which is Death in Her Hands by Ottessa Moshfegh. So she is sort of a hot writer right now. She, I think, was shortlisted for the Booker Prize for one of her novels back in 2015. She wrote a book that everybody praised called My Year of Rest and Relaxation last year, 2 years ago, in 2018, about a woman who sort of goes into solitude and lives a year of her life in kind of a like narcotic haze, not really doing any interacting. This book is about a solitudinous old woman who goes on walks with her dog and one day discovers a possible crime has happened in the woods where she goes walking. And so, I feel like this woman, Ottessa Moshfegh, is a writer for our time, where we are spending a lot of time in solitude. Maybe she is, oops, and I need my 1/4 cup too. So this is the last of the flour here that I'm going to sift first. So sifting the flour not only makes sure I don't have any clumps of flour in there, but it also gives it a little bit of air as you're sifting it so that you get a nice, light, and fluffy pile of flour. Anyway, so Ottessa Moshfegh is a writer who is sort of mining the well of solitude these days. You can find comfort in that, or maybe it's not the sort of thing that you're interested in right now. Both are valid responses to our current climate, but she is an extraordinary writer and a really talented woman, and I kind of love to go and watch interviews with her because she's just such a dry wit. Anyway, this book is one of those like slow burn whodunits where it starts out and we've got this amateur detective sort of set up, and then the narrative kind of falls apart and we start to suspect that maybe our narrator is unreliable and we're not really sure what's happening, and I kind of like those books where like you never really know who's telling the truth. This is one of those books. So it's really about like the interiority of a person who maybe doesn't have a whole lot in her life at this point. This book is making me sounding a little sad to me right now, now that I think about it. We'll save that one for April, everybody. But I do think that this writer, Ottessa Moshfegh, is probably one of our best writers right now. She's just really talented with words, which is kind of what you want out of a writer, right? All right, so that was ½ teaspoon of salt that I just put into the 3¼ cups of sifted all-purpose flour. We gotta wait a couple minutes for my yeast to bloom a little more. I've got some bubbles on top, but it's not really bouncing in the way that I want it to, or bubbling in the way that I want it to. Words are hard, everybody. All right, so while we wait for that to kick off, let's go on to book number 2. This is Must I Go by Yi-Yun Lee. I know of this author because she wrote a short story collection, I don't know, back in the early 2010s. The early 10s? What are we calling it? Anyway, the early 2010s, everybody. Called Gold Boy, Emerald Girl. And it was a really great short story collection. Like the kind of quiet domestic life stories that are, you know, not super flashy, but she has a really great insight into relationships, like interpersonal relationships. I really like her insight into maybe like the cross-cultural Chinese American societies is also really insightful. And she doesn't have a flashy writing style, but she's got a real really beautiful way of stringing sentences together that I kind of love. So that's her short story collection, Gold Boy, Emerald Girl, which I also encourage you to check out. This one is a little more, what's the word I'm looking for here? A little more like intellectually curious. And so this novel, Must I Go, starts in 2010. We have an 81-year-old Lilia Liska Imbadi, who is looking back on her life as she annotates her ex-lover Roland Bully's posthumous diary, which sounds like one of those like academic books that maybe isn't as exciting as it could be. But this one leans pretty heavily on Nabokov's Pale Fire as a sort of framework. And NPR says about this book that its narrative voice about love, grief, marriage, family history, it seems to echo the Hamilton song "Who Lives, Who Dies, and Who Tells the Story." Our narrator is telling the story, and she is a sharp-witted narrator who does not suffer fools. She's telling the story by annotating the diary of a fool, which seems a little strange at first, but it's because she had a brief affair with this man, and her daughter was the result of that affair. And she is trying to wrestle with the grief of her daughter's suicide through annotating this man's diaries. Oh, excuse me, everybody. That's my timer. I have also loaves of bread in the oven that I need to take the lid off of, because I'm going to need that lid in a little bit when we start frying up these tigonites. Okay. And let's set that again for 30 minutes. Okay. Bread tangent aside, I love stories that really play with the idea of editorializing or like post-fact storytelling, where like you're never quite sure where the actual kernel of the story is. We talked about this in the last one, I guess, unreliable narrators. And I don't think this book has as much to do with unreliability as it does with the idea of like narrative and who gets to tell the story. I just like when people explore the idea of storytelling through the vehicle of storytelling, which is funny to me anyway. All right, so this yeast. I wonder if my water was too cool, everybody. Good thing my first batch actually turned out okay. So anyway, here's what we're going to do. I have to mix this together now to get a nice sort of thick, thin batter. I don't know how to describe it, but I will show you when I'm done. I'm going to add my... Oh no, there's the yeast doing its thing. Okay, it's blooming. I'm going to add this here to the flour. And I'm also going to get another 1.5 cups of warm tap water. Warmish, like 80 degrees, 90 degrees. Cup and a half. And pour that in. And then I'm going to take my hand mixer. So again, a little loud this week, everybody. Thank you for your patience. And blend this up until I get a nice, smooth, consistent batter. Actually, I always forget how quiet my hand mixer is. It's not a super high-powered hand mixer. If I have to do anything that requires a lot of power, I've got a KitchenAid stand mixer that I use for that. But, alright, so... this is blending up nicely, although it's starting to look a little thick already. Maybe. Oh, it's climbing up the mixer. The blades, they're called blades, everybody. It's climbing up the mixer nicely, which means that I've got a good, flinging it out of the bowl consistency here. Yeah, that's gonna be right. And so, slowly but surely, we'll spin it out until it dribbles off. Okay. Perfect. All right. I had a whisk or a scraper. All right. Scraper just to get the last little bits off here. I can dribble the last little bits back into the bowl. Shoot these into the sink. Ho-ho! And show you the batter consistency now. All right, so it looks pretty wet. And as I pull my spatula or my rubber scraper up into the air, it should be sort of sliding off. All right, and now this gets set aside for an hour, and it's going to sit and hopefully bubble a little bit, because that is the purpose of the yeasted batter. All right, so the next step, and I should have done this a little while ago, is get my frying pan, which is, ooh, that's hot from the oven. Get my frying pan, which is full of, full of a ½ inch of vegetable oil, up to temperature, because we're gonna spoon these things in and fry them for a few minutes at a time on each side. I will get my paper towel ready so that when the tiganites come out of the batter, or come out of the pan, they can cool off right there. And now I can move on to my next book, which is Disability Visibility. Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. It's a collection of essays, narrative nonfiction, from disabled folks, 37 stories from disabled people, that's organized into sections. And I didn't write that down. So 4 different sections that are sort of exploring the topics of disability in our societies. This book started as a StoryCorps project for the 25th anniversary of the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act. I love StoryCorps and all the work that they do, collecting stories of people in our culture, especially when they do this sort of collating of stories of people who don't often get their voices heard. In this case especially, all of these stories, this is a really important book. To me especially, I don't, I'm an able-bodied person. I don't experience the world in a way that makes me feel like I am not a part of it, or makes me feel like anytime I need to have accommodations made, that my living is sort of one of my favorite quotes from the book is out of one of the essays, and the woman who's writing it says, "Taking up space as a disabled person is always revolutionary." I think probably we don't, as able-bodied people, do enough exploration of what it is or what it's like to live in the world as a disabled person. And this book, all 37 stories, taught me so much about what, what that's like. What, the mind frame of not seeing yourself represented in art, or not seeing yourself represented in politics, or, I don't know. The epigraph of the book, by playwright and actor Neil Marcus, who I guess is active in the disability activism space, says that disability is not a brave struggle or courage in the face of adversity. Disability is an art. It's an ingenious way to live. I really just want to pass this book to everyone I know, just so that people understand and get the experience of disabled people living in our world. Anyway, that is Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong. Again, you can see it here. Available in hard copy in our catalog. Our library doesn't actually own it yet. I just put it into our purchase order for this coming week, so that it will be ready at some point soon. My oil is getting a little warm here. It's almost ready. But in the meantime, let's move on to our next book, which is Having and Being Had. I'll get that straight at some point. By Eula Biss. She wrote a pretty popular nonfiction book called On Immunity, a few years ago that got a lot of attention back then. And so this book, Having and Being Had, is actually a sort of result of that book because it was popular enough that she got a largish advance on this book. And so this book is actually meditations on the kind of twisted individual experience of class and capitalism in America especially, but I think sort of across societies. The book is made up of anecdotes and I'm going to show you the batter that has now resulted from having sat for an hour. And it doesn't look too different, but it does have a bit of rising happening in the bottom. It's not as much as I would have liked, so we'll see how these turn out. Anyway, she's writing small cultural criticism essays. They're really like a page or two long, so this book is a fun thing, like a nice thought experiment to dip into here and there. If you're not looking for like a narrative right now, or a big collection of essays, or a biography, or something like that, just sit this on your bedside table and dip into it as you want. So she's asking a lot of questions about, like, what does the concept value mean? What does the concept work mean? Service, that sort of thing. I talked in the first two books about stories that I like when they... Alright, so we got a nice thick batter here that I am going to dip in and see if my oil is hot yet. And sure enough, we've got some frying going on. So, while I talk here, I'm going to start dipping this batter in spoonful by spoonful. You see I've got a ladle and a spoon because the batter now that it's done its setting and a little bit of rising with the yeast and stuff is a little stickier than it was when we first mixed it up. But that's a nice smell. All right. Anyway, I was talking about Having and Being Had by Eula Biss, which is a collection of essays. Anyway, I like a book that is really meant as the author's journal of exploration. I think she does this thing right, where she comes in to sitting down at her workplace, workstation, whatever we want to call it, without a preconceived idea of what she's going to write. She's looking at words and definitions that get used a lot and that she wants to sort of interrogate intellectually. And I love to see that unfold on the page. I really do like watching another person's brain in action, if you know what I mean when I say that. Just the way that they're processing as they move on through the page and through their writing. Alright, so these guys get fried on each side until golden brown. Boy, do these look pretty. I can't wait to show you. Anyway, the book asks a lot of big questions, like how we can sort of ethically consume things as members of the middle class, how you can fulfill desires without being complicit in, things that you hate. It's a big-hearted book, really meticulous about itself, or about the things that it's exploring. I just really appreciate that. All right. I'm going to flip the first one here, because it looks pretty. So they get really puffy once you put them in the oil. Kind of like a beignet, if you've ever had one of those. Only they're not a beignet. They're nice and fluffy. And what's going to happen is I'm going to serve it with some warmed up honey. My brother-in-law is a beekeeper and, gives us a nice discount on some of the honey that he gets from his hives at the end of the year. And, there's something about, like, straight from the hive honey that it's really lovely. All right, so these are turning out beautifully, and I got to keep spooning them in, so I got to talk about this next book quickly. But it is... So that's Having and Being Had by Eula Biss, everybody. This one is Abigail by Magda Szabo. Sabo, not Jabo. I'm destroying library books here. She is a Hungarian author who has had. She's been writing since like the 70s. She might actually be passed on now. I don't know that for sure. But this is her most popular novel in her native Hungary. A couple years ago, the New York Review of Books published a translation of The Door that really did well in international markets. But this one is the most recent one. It was republished this year in translation. And this is her most popular book in her home country. About a young woman, Gina, who is, and I'm going to sort of quote this here. In 1943, Gina's father, a general in the Hungarian army, ships his daughter off to an oppressively pious boarding school in the remote village of Arkod. And despite her protests, the general really doesn't offer her any explanations about why this is happening, because she's, up to this point, led a pretty lovely, free-spirited life, despite her mother having, I believe, passed on. So the book is a nice unfolding of plot over the telling of the story. Gina gets there. It is, in fact, oppressively pious. Her hair is cut to look like the other students. Everybody has to wear a uniform. Any kind of individuality is sort of pushed out of people. I made that first one that I just scooped in there way too big, everybody. And so, at first, she sort of scoffs at her classmates' kind of juvenile antics as they try to skirt some rules and things like that. The title of the story, of the book, Abigail, comes from this statue that exists at the school that everyone sort of gives this kind of like wish-making status. They ask it for things, they pray to it, they do that sort of stuff. And Gina, our heroine, is sort of skeptical at first. But the story, like I said, unfolds in this really nice way where she comes to understand her classmates' juvenile antics as means of attaining some kind of individuality in this really oppressive situation. Eventually, the students are... the story takes us to a point where there are... It's 1943. People are plastering anti-Nazi propaganda all over the town where the school exists. And our heroine, Gina, starts to suspect that the revolutionary who is doing that is also maybe responsible for some of the things that this statue is like granting to the people that are asking it for help. And so it becomes a bit of a mystery also. Magda Szabo is known for this kind of like workhorse dialogue that is really brilliantly understated, but also like plot-driven and fulfilling, and so she has this reputation as a really wonderful writer. And I haven't finished this book. Most of my information here is coming from reviews, but that definitely suits my experience or fits my experience of this book. I just think it's a really great characterization of this 14-year-old who is facing this like really terrible transition in her life during a really terrible time, 1943. And so I don't know, I'd recommend this pretty much to anybody I know who likes fiction, especially who likes realistic fiction. Alright, so here is a nice, beautiful golden... Put it on this thing back here so you all can see it. Oh no, I just stuck it into one that wasn't fried on both sides yet, so I'll show you this one instead. So they get real puffy, everybody! They get really beautifully puffy. And, like I said, I'm going to heat up some honey and drizzle some warm honey over this. Greek people often serve it with Greek cheese. I can't recall the name of the cheese off the top of my head, but a sort of softer cheese, a softer tasting cheese, I should say. And but these can be served pretty much with anything. Like powdered sugar would do wonderfully with these because they are fried dough. And that is a tiganite. Everyone, they are nice and warm, and I can't wait to give them to my family. While these are frying up, let's do lightning round. Mr. Fox by Helen Oyeyemi. I bet I mangled her last name there, everybody, even though I love her work. Come to think of it, I have never once tried to look her up, the pronunciation of her name on the internet. That's terrible. Anyway, I may have talked about this book on this program before, but Mr. Fox is a writer, and he can't seem to stop killing the heroines of his stories until one day his muse seemingly comes to life and visits him at home, and then there's this tangled domestic tale drama between Mr. Fox and his muse and his wife Daphne, and the author, Helen Oyeyemi, is just a really brilliant writer in an like always off-kilter way. Someone who is constantly pushing the envelope, I guess, in her stories. A lot of her stories border on horror every now and then. I don't believe this is not one that I would describe that way, but it is a really wild tale of writing and the writing process. We have The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner, which is a a novel set in a women's prison, and Kushner is known for being really diligent about her research that goes into novels, and a really great thinker about just people's experiences. And this book has been hailed pretty much anywhere anybody wrote about it as a brilliant insight into the lives of the marginalized folks that end up in prison. And I think that it's probably worth everyone's time to pick this book up. We have Docile, or Docile, by K.M. Sbarra. The book's tagline is, "There is no consent under capitalism," and this is a science fiction story about dociles. At some point in the future, there are people called dociles who are contracted to other people to be body and soul their servants, I guess, is how I would describe it, but even more than that. And in this case, it's an exploration of pharmaceuticals and power dynamics and, the chilling effects of debt as it gets passed down. We have The Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas by Gertrude Stein, which is a modernist classic, but this time illustrated by Mara Kalman. I almost said Moira, even though I've seen this. So this is, like I said, a modernist classic. If you haven't read it before, you can give it a shot. This edition is made more beautiful by the illustrations, which are really lovely pastels and paintings and etc., etc. My oil's getting a little too hot here. That really highlight the content of the book. We have If Then, How the Simulmatics Corporation Invented the Future. If you want to see where our algorithmically dominated society started, this is the book to pick up. Facebook and all of Silicon Valley, probably the social media side of Silicon Valley especially, have roots in this Simulmatics Corporation. This is by Jill Lepore. If Then, How the Simulmatics Corporation Invented the Future. And then we have X plus Y, A Mathematician's Manifesto for Rethinking Gender by Eugenia Chang. It might be Eugenia, I don't know. Again, I didn't look up the author's name to pronounce it, I'm sorry. But she is a mathematician, so being in a male-dominated field, she has ideas about gender and gendering things and concepts and things like that. And really, it's an exploration of how our society has collapsed possibilities because of the way that we approach gender and concepts and things like that. A really great book to dive into if you're looking to understand a little bit about that. It's my last book, everybody, and this one ran long too. It's 11:35 by my clock, so thanks for sticking around until I was done talking about all my books. As always, I will catch up with my timeline here. The recipe and books will be posted on the Facebook event page and on our website, especially jeanslibrary.org. Thanks again to John Lewis, Star Library patron, for the idea for the program. And I'll see you again in 2 weeks on December 20th. Take it easy, be safe, spread love. I will see you soon.